Hello, this is Demographics Decoded with me, demographer Simon Kuestenmacher.
And me, Michael Yardney, property and wealth creation expert. And this is the podcast where we unveil the trends shaping your future. Now, we've been talking about aging population on a number of our previous Demographics Decoded podcasts. But today I'd like to discuss with you, Simon, what happens when Australia's baby boomers actually start leaving the workforce in numbers, because from what I read from one of your recent articles in the New Daily, that's actually happening right now. And while it's tempting to focus on the number of retirees and aged care needs like we've discussed before, as far as I could tell from reading your article, there's another looming crisis, a skills gap.
Yeah, and it's quite severe because the baby boomers are, of course, a big cohort that we're losing to retirement. And so they leave, just numerically speaking, they leave a big hole behind because usually, Mike, there are not that many people retiring. And so you go, okay, so we need to fill this gap. And you say, okay, no worries. We just import more migrants to fill those gaps. And it's like, well, okay, sure, fair enough. That would fill the numerical gaps. But baby boomers are leaving more behind than just an empty chair in the office. They are very, very experienced workers with a lot of knowledge. So they create a severe knowledge and leadership gap there. And that needs to be filled. And you say, no worries. So it's finally time for the poor forgotten Gen Xers behind. But the problem is that we're now retiring a cohort of baby boomers that is larger than the cohort of Gen X following them. So you'd say, well, this is first and foremost good news, to be honest. If you're born in the 60s and 70s, if you're a Gen Xer, this is great stuff because it means that there aren't that many people in your age bracket that compete for the newly freed up leadership jobs. So it's actually great news for Gen X. But for a business, it means that I'm a bit concerned about where do I get my leaders from? Do I have enough? And this is where businesses then probably need to look for younger candidates in leadership positions than they were previously comfortable with. There are not that many Gen Xers out there. So that means you need to push the Xers into top leadership jobs, and then you have millennials after this. So you, in a sense, have to promote them a bit faster than you had planned for in the back of your mind.
Well, if you're watching this or listening to this and wondering, is this really relevant to me or should I skip to the next podcast? Please hang around, because whether you're a business owner, an investor, a policymaker, or maybe you're just wondering what kind of Australia we're building for the next generation, I think as Simon and I unpack this great article he wrote in the New Daily, you're going to find this is very relevant to you. So, Simon, baby boomers are now leaving the workforce in large numbers, you say, but and there's a gap. What sort of gap? What size gap are we talking about?
Well, we talk a bit by bit about millions of Australian workers that are leaving. It's fine because we have still young people coming at the other younger spectrum, and we can import as many people as we please. So numerically speaking, you can say it's not that much of a problem. Well, it kind of still is, but you then need to restructure your business because you want to remember that the people that where are we retiring those baby boomers from? Largely from senior positions where they have decision-making roles. And so we are retiring the last generation that well and truly cares about, on average, about hierarchy. And so as the baby boomers leave, all the younger generations that are left are more or less allergic to hierarchies. So that means you then need to rethink the way that your business operates. It means you must flatten the organizational structures. You can't completely get away with hierarchy. I'm not telling you anything like, the junior grad is pretty much the same level as your top directors or anything like this. That's not the case. But the younger workers very much all demand to have shorter channels of communication with top leadership. They demand access to leadership. So you must actually take these things into account. And that is very, very hard for a business to pull off because you need to essentially change your org charts. You need to change the way that your business operates. It's a bit like changing the engine of a running car. It's not all that easy, but it is kind of what you need to do.
Not while it's running. That's the problem, isn't it?
That's it. That's exactly the problem. And you can see that we're not retiring all baby boomers next Monday, but this is a thing that slowly sneaks up on us. And so how do we bit by bit transition to this? How do we flatten organizational structures over time? It's a very, very hard challenge. And this is where, if you're big, the bigger your business, the bigger the challenge, because then you need to have a very smart HR team that changes processes structurally or just fluently, bit by bit. Not easy at all, this challenge.
Is this uniform across the economy, or there are certain sectors, certain industries that are likely to be hit harder by baby boomers retiring?
Yeah, so this is where my concept of the retirement cliff enters the discussions. The retirement cliff can look at any kind of industry, at any kind of job in particular, and we measure then what share of the workforce is nearing retirement, is 55 to 64. So we know that in 10 years' time, they leave the world of work. And there's certain industry where we have a much higher share of the workers in this particular age cohort. And that's quite severe. Particularly worried, as I always am, about education. I'm worried about healthcare. This is where we lose people fast because they have
Interestingly,
such a
you've
high
also
share.
mentioned truck drivers and lorry drivers and bus drivers in the past as well. So it's not necessarily higher educated jobs, is it?
No, it's just the way that we kind of ended up structuring workforces. We do, of course, have in agriculture, for example, a big share of older farm owners who then bit by bit will try to hand the farm over to their kids. In many cases, the kids will not take over the farm. And so that means you need to just sell the business. So you have all this farm aggregation happening in regional Australia because of this aging out of the baby boomers. And we have this this always happened, by the way. So it's not new, but it now happens at a larger scale. So it means we create bigger farms. That means we need more technologically advanced farms because you use more self-driving machinery and so forth to look after the land, which then in turn means you need fewer workers in the agricultural sector, which in turn means there are fewer people living in these small ag towns, which in turn means there will be certain kind of services that become less financially viable in those towns, which means there'll be quite a bit of lifeblood being sucked out of our smallest towns in Australia. All of these are ripple effects of baby boomers retiring. It is rather shocking how deep demographic development like this can go.
Now, we talked a moment ago about different skill levels in jobs, and please, this is not a judgment of workers or their worth if I offended you how I said that. But today, Simon, 80% of Australians finish year 12 compared to when I went to school. Of those, more than half go to university. From what I gather, then this leaves fewer young Australians entering trades or service sector jobs that need less formal education.
Absolutely correct. So we of course are all aware of a big skills shortage, meaning just not enough workers in the construction industry, in infrastructure. Who's filling the gaps that now, on top of the shortage, the retiring baby boomers in the sector leave behind? We don't have enough people in the TAFE system to fill those gaps. On top of this, our migration system isn't skewed or isn't set up in a way to import enough of those workers. We don't utilize our migration system strategically enough to prepare for the shortage that baby boomers leave behind in quite a few of those industries. We need to be much more strategic about weaponizing migration in this country, which we're not at the moment. And so I'm quite nervous about this. You look at manufacturing as well. We say manufacturing is on the decline. Now it has a more or less stagnant workforce. As a share of GDP, manufacturing continues to decline. But overall, we need 800, 900,000 people in manufacturing any given day of the week. And that's difficult because we have about 20% of them nearing retirement age, which is a high share. And so are we attracting enough young people into manufacturing, or are we at least attracting enough capital into manufacturing to replace the retiring baby boomers through machines and AI and software?
So
Big
do you
question
think
mark.
AI and automation will replace many of these jobs? Are we worrying about something that's going to be resolved by different levels of productivity that AI is going to bring us?
So I'm of course first and foremost looking at the world through a demographic lens, and I'm seeing the looming skills shortage, the hole that the retiring baby boomers leave behind. I see this as a massive, massive crisis. This is gigantic because all the while, as Australia ages, the very same baby boomers soon need care. So the aged care sector doubles in about 15 years' time. So there is enough jobs that we are creating. So the demand for labor will be really big. So I'm not concerned about AI taking jobs at all. I think AI, automation, robotics, these are welcome developments. They will not lead to higher unemployment in this country. And if my assumption would be mistaken, and if AI becomes even more productive than I consider, what Australia would then simply do is to slow down the migration intake. And then we would still not have high unemployment. So I consider the idea of high unemployment in Australia in the near to mid-term, I find this ridiculous. I don't see how this would play out at all.
So my suggestion was AI would maybe take away fill some of the jobs that baby boomers are leaving behind. But I can't see it massively improving the amount of meals a waiter can serve, fill supermarket shelves faster, or clean your office faster. AI and robotics will take over some jobs, but it's not going to fill the gap. So what happens then? Migration, I guess, is the answer.
Yeah, that's always in what is still a very attractive migration destination, Australia. We can always use this to fill the jobs. We, of course, also must acknowledge that it's a bit too simplistic to always just point to migration, because migration also, while I think it is a net positive for this country, economically we know it is, but I think even culturally it is a net positive. It does bring challenges with it. The biggest challenge being everybody coming to Australia needs to be housed, and we don't have enough housing in there. So if housing was magically available, I'd be rather relaxed about migration, but it's not. And so we need to be within the migration intake. We need to be much more strategic, and we need to have a clear understanding which industries we bleed dry from a workforce perspective, where we say we don't give you enough migrants, so that we force you to invest into technology to fill the skills gap. And we also must then pick and choose where we say these kind of industries, we don't expect AI to play too big of a role. So we will give you a larger share of our skilled migrants. And also within the migrant system, we will probably need to slightly minimize student intake. And then the additional jobs we tend through skilled visas, employer-sponsored visas, we tend them directly into the workforce. So we need to be more strategic about this, and which is why I called in the past for a national demographic strategy. The idea is that we tell the people openly why we import migrants. And the story is simple. We say, well, we need younger people that work to soften the blow of the aging of society, blow of baby boomers leaving the world of work, which is the reason why all the migrants that we take in are under 40, because we want them
Yeah.
to soften this.
Every time we do a show on migration, we get lots of comments and unfortunately more negative ones, not about us, but about migration. By the way, if you want to hear Simon's concept of a migration strategy, go back, and wherever you're watching this or listening to this, go back to past episodes, which are lessons on demographics, and a lot of them on migration. But a lot of people seem to be anti-migration. They don't really fully understand benefits it brings. Are we not bringing in the right people, Simon, or are we maybe placing them in the wrong locations, not maybe where all the jobs are required, or some of the jobs are required, like in regional Australia?
Absolutely. In the medical space, we are reasonably smart by handing out medical doctor type visas with a regional hook, so to speak. We say, yeah, come into Australia, but first you have to work for a couple of years in a regional destination. And the hope then is, of course, that the newly arrived doctor decides that this is a wonderful regional town and sets up shop there forever. Quite often, the doctors leave regional Australia and move to the big cities as soon as they are allowed to. And then we need to get another new overseas doctor in. We should do something like this with more jobs. We should funnel certain kind of trades into the regions, because we should have a decentralizing population strategy in this country. We continue to grow the country like crazy. We do grow at a very fast rate, and yet we live in the exact same cities that we lived in 100 years ago. The only new city that we built is the Gold Coast, a sizable city. We should constantly be master planning new cities in this country, which would then be, based around a new fast rail network across the country as well, to finally integrate these newly built cities better with the existing capital cities. But we're not doing this. So we're artificially shortening land supply in this country. We live in this gigantic country, and we live in very few cities. So far so that we are the country in the world where the biggest share of the population lives in the top 5 cities. More than 2/3 of our population lives in the 5 biggest cities. If you ignore all the city states like Singapore, we are the country where this is the highest share. And we have plenty of land available. We could do it otherwise, but we choose not to. And so we say, well, is there an argument to be made to be completely rethinking the way that Australia operates? And I think right now is a good opportunity because demographically speaking, baby boomers are the single most important marker that ever occurred in Australia. Them being born was called the baby boom. It was absolutely gigantic. It stands out in any statistic that you ever look at when you throw 3.8 babies at the peak into a family. It's gigantic. And then, of course, boomers reinvented the way we work by having so many of them in the workforce. And now they will reinvent retirement and later on aged care. This is a good opportunity to change the country around a change in life stage for the baby boomers. So I would say if I was a bold political leader, this is a rather excellent time right now to come up with big, bold policy shifts.
Now, we spent a lot of time talking about employees and baby boomers retiring as employees. But Simon, a lot of baby boomers are business owners as well, and not necessarily big businesses, but the local cafe, the local dry cleaner. I can think of our dry cleaners, a baby boomer, other small businesses, trades as well, as we've said, and they're coming into the final stage of their business life as well. But I think self-employed people seem to hang on a little bit longer than employees.
Very much so, very much so. So we know that self-employed people work longer than employers. That has partially to do with the way that businesses tend to work. So we, of course, have survivor bias in it. We talk about businesses that are still around. Otherwise, you couldn't be a business owner in retirement if your business wasn't around. And so usually a business creates momentum. Usually a business continues to grow if it survives. And so you go, well, I remember how many customers I had 10 years ago. Now I have many more. This is not a great time to retire. I still grow. This is wonderful. Also, as a business owner, you tend to have spent much, much more time thinking and connecting emotionally to your business. So that means you are more closely tied to this thing. Giving up your business means giving up a much bigger part of your life than just giving up your job, your employed, salaried job. And that's difficult. And so, okay, so baby boomers hang on for longer, but eventually baby boomers will sell their business. And this leads to this big surge of businesses wanting to be sold at the same time. And that, of course, then means, well, where do we sell those businesses to? And so it go, in theory, this is the golden decade for young millennials who want to escape the salary lifestyle, to buy up a baby boomer business on the cheap, because there's so many baby boomers wanting to sell their suburban accounting business, their car repair shop, whatever it is. So you go, this is a rather cool opportunity to do this. The one problem, and this is me talking to business brokers whose job it is to help facilitate the sale of a business, is to get the money. So if I'm a young millennial, the bank tends to not give me millions of dollars, or whether it's $1 million for a local car repair shop or something like this. They don't give it to me because they want my house as a security. And I don't have a house because we pushed first home ownership back so far.
Yes.
There are not that many millennials that are cashed up enough to buy the relatively small businesses. So a business that can be rather wonderful, dry cleaners and so forth, it's still capital intensive. You buy machinery and so forth. So it's difficult to sell. It's much more difficult to sell the business than the sheer demographic numbers suggested, because we don't have a vehicle of giving money to the millennials or Gen Xers that potentially would buy the business. So that's a market problem that we have. And what would...
I guess it's more accentuated in regional Australia too, Simon.
Absolutely. It's a general rule here that if a problem occurs in Australia in general, it tends to be more extreme in the regions. And so you then go, well, what happens to the local business? Well, maybe a local competitor can buy it. And so that, of course, then ultimately leads to more monopolies or quasi-monopolies across the country. It leads to less consumer choice. If a business can't be sold, it just dies. And that means that the business then gets spread across the existing or remaining players. It's not necessarily helpful for consumer prices, because the fewer players there in the market, the higher the consumer price on average. So it's not a development, the retirement of baby boomer business owners. where the average consumer stands to gain anything. So we want to incentivize as a country. We want to incentivize people buying those businesses, taking them over. And of course, if you talk to baby boomer owners, they tell you how god awful and difficult it is to find people to first and foremost want to buy, and then to can actually pull it off and buy the whole thing. And on top of this, and this is what the brokers tell me, is that baby boomers tend to have inflated ideas of what their business is worth.
Because they've put so much time, love, effort, emotion, gone through the hardship. So yes, they've got a bias there. Now, Simon, I want to ask you a couple more questions about this, but I know you've done a lot of research into this. If people are interested in finding out more about how your research and the demographics group can help their businesses, their industries, their organizations, just tell us briefly what you do. And then I got a couple more questions I'd like to ask you.
We always show businesses, clients, big conferences, what their particular world, product, service looks like through the demographic lens. And in Australia, overwhelmingly, we'll have positive messages because this is one of the few countries where we still see growth, population growth, economic growth, where we are not too impacted by geopolitical disruptions. Our business model is simplistic but sound in this country. Ultimately, it's a sense of optimism, but every now and then we talk about businesses where just the demographic shifts work very much against them. And so we then talk about a realignment that needs to happen with businesses. And it's good fun to actually find a business that is struggling simply because the demographic setup is wrong, because we can help those businesses rather quickly.
I'll leave a link in the show notes how people can get in contact with you and the demographics group. Now, in an article you wrote about this in the New Daily, and that's not behind a paywall, so people can see that. And I know you also write for the Australian, but you mentioned that there are 10.1 million Australians who work as employees for somebody else's business or organisation, but there's almost 1.7 million Australians that are their own boss, and that shows the Australian entrepreneurial spirit. Almost 1 million of those, though, are sole traders, I found from your research, which is very interesting. That means they don't employ any staff. They manage the business themselves or with their spouse. That leaves close to 700,000 who have got a business with one or more staff. But I guess it'd be particularly hard for these sole traders to find somebody to buy their business because it's not really a business. It's a job, isn't it? They've bought themselves a job.
Yeah. To a degree, that is absolutely correct. And the business that they created around them, imagine you are a sole tradie, then your business is your skill set and is your experience. So it's not, let's say you created a cool company logo, your van is colored a certain way, whatever it is, but your customers, they would not be happy to jump to the next tradie who buys the business. So ultimately, all you can sell is your truck and your equipment. In a sense, the database of your past clients, that isn't worth as much because those clients purchased you and the trust in you. And then the person who buys your business is just a new dude. And so that's not overly interesting for the clients.
Yep.
So many of these sole trader businesses don't have an IP that is so particularly unique to them. There might be the rare case where this is actually happening, but ultimately many of those businesses will just disappear. There will be a bit of a sale of equipment if that's the type of business. But other than this, we just hope that enough new tradies fill the gap. But we lose a lot of them. And that creates a gap. And first and foremost, it creates a gap of choice. That's problematic.
Having said that, if we look on the positive side, that means for younger prospective business owners, this coming decade is going to be one of fantastic opportunities.
Absolutely. So if I was a young apprentice at the moment, or a young person, I would say, look at the insane shortage in the trades, learn a trade that you think will be in high demand. So anything that is linked to renovating, upgrading a house, for example, will be in high demand. And then the important thing is to become your own boss. Statistically speaking, becoming a sole trader rather than an employee for any trade gives you a pay increase of 27%. That translates into more than a decade worth of wage throughout a working career. And that makes a lot of sense to me to do this. So I would always implore young people, if they have the desire to do so, become a tradie, learn your trade well, and then start your own business. Complex stuff you need to pull off there, but financially it is a no-brainer to do this. So you also will have a nice market prepared for you because of the retiring baby boomers. So this can be a big advantage of the or for the new tradies.
Now, Family Business Australia suggests that 70% of family businesses don't even have documentation for a successful succession strategy. They just do it. They don't have systems. It means their business is much harder to sell. What advice would you give people who are 10, 15 years away from retirement age, how to set themselves up to maximize their value of their business?
The first thing is that you need to come to terms with your own mortality. It's as basic as that. You need to know that sooner or later you will die, and hopefully a little bit before that you will sell your business. And that means you need to prepare for this, because this is not a short-term thing that you can do. And somebody is willing to do this. Ideally, you need to find successors while you are still in the business. You train them up. You create a proactive handover over a year or two. That would be the best possible way of pulling this off. But how many people are willing to do this? Because you do need to proactively stand back from your business. And people quite often don't know, when do I actually want to stand back? Because they say, well, do I want to stand back in 5 years, in 10 years? And what do I do after this? So this has then to do with the idea of who am I going to be in retirement? So you need to think ahead quite a long time. You need several steps ahead of the game in order to sell your business in the most efficient and most helpful way. And quite often we just don't talk about this. As Family Business Australia just pointed out there, 70% of people don't do it because it takes so much uncomfortable reflection about your own future that we don't do it. But if we ourselves are proactive about understanding that we are retiring, that we are transitioning to a new phase of life, that we are needing to sell our business, we can actually smoothen this transfer significantly. Ultimately, this means that we probably get more money for our business if we pick and choose a right candidate. We also then, of course, know that our business is in safe hands, because you still will be emotionally attached to your business even once it's sold and you don't have nothing to do with it anymore. Because, hey, this is something to be proud of. This is your legacy. This operations continues for another couple of decades once you left the world behind. That's a nice thing to know that you've done this, but it is only possible if you proactively chase after it.
So, Simon, what I've learned from you today is Australia is facing a demographic and an economic fork in the road as baby boomers exit the workforce, and that's going to be happening in record numbers over the next decade. We're not just losing bodies, we're losing skills, experience, and capacity. And you mentioned that while migration has always been part of the solution, it's not just about bringing in more people. We've got to bring in the right people, put them in give them the right support, give them long-term plans to become powerful and important in a new society here. And if we rethink this approach, won't only just fill the gaps, we will have a stronger, more resilient economy in the future. So for those of you watching this and listening to this, thank you for again joining Simon and me on Demographics Decoded. Each week we bring you information about how these demographic changes are going to shape your future. And if you got something from this, especially if you know somebody who's in the baby boomer age group, or even younger, who's looking at moving on to the next stage of their life, thinking about planning for it, send them this show. And if you don't regularly subscribe so you get our weekly updates, please stop for a second wherever you're watching or listening to this, subscribe or follow so that you can get our regular updates. And again, we'd love you to pass this on to somebody who would benefit from the show as well. Simon, thank you very much. Look forward to catching up with you again next week.
Fantastic. Catch you next week, Michael.
This Demographics Decoded podcast has been brought to you by Metropole Property Strategists. We provide a complete range of services to help our clients safely create intergenerational wealth through strategic property and wealth advice. If you're looking to buy an investment property or your next home, why not have a discovery chat with one of our wealth strategists? Just go to metropole.com.au and explore your options. You'll find we're much more than just another buyer's agent. We provide a complete range of services, including property advisory, wealth advisory, home buying, buyer's agency, property management, renovations, and development management services. The team at Metropole will help you with frameworks that I've fine-tuned over 5 decades, and we've been helping clients with for well over 25 years. We're big enough to tip the scales in your favour, but still small enough to care. In between these Demographics Decoded shows, you can follow me on social media, and I suggest you also follow Simon Kuestenmacher. You'll find him regularly posting on all social media platforms. And thanks for spending the last little while with Simon and me. I hope you got some benefit from the show. And if you did, and you know somebody who may also benefit, please tell them about Demographics Decoded. There's a share button on every podcast app. I hope you're going to be doing them a favour, and you're definitely going to be doing us a favour, helping us now quest to make as many people as possible aware of the demographic changes that are going to be shaping their future. And of course, if you don't currently subscribe, we'd love you to. And of course, any of the information that we've been sharing with you is general information because we don't know your specific circumstances.